welcome to Chaotic Risk Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticrisk.com. And my special guest today is Prophet, the lead singer from the Arizona-based band St. Manus. How you doing today, Prophet?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be talking to you again. And I got to let the people know who are listening to this that we have This Is Metal page that you belong to, and we were discussing like people's favorite live albums, and you happened to bring up the topic of Ozzy Osbourne's live album, Speak of the Devil, and I thought this would make for a fun kind of conversation for several reasons. So let's get right into this, because this is Ozzy's very first ever live album as a solo artist, and it was released November 27th, 1982. And what makes it so unique is, and interesting, is all the songs on the album are all Black Sabbath songs. And so let's get right into it, Prophet. Tell the people why this album means so much to you, or, go back when you first, picked up the album or heard it for the very first time.
Well, it came out when I was 20 years old. I had turned 20 in 1982. And I could remember watching Black Sabbath on TV when I was about 11 years old, 12 years old.
Uh-huh.
And, the whole world was afraid of those guys, it seemed like, back then. They took them seriously, and they thought, this is a true band of devil worshippers. And Ozzy was, the worst one of all as far as society was concerned.
Yeah. Even back then.
Huh?
Even back in the Black Sabbath days, yeah.
Well, the Black Sabbath days is where it started, because nobody had ever done evil or music that kind of dark, lyrically before that.
And I read an interview.
Really, Black Sabbath is like the godfathers of heavy metal, as far as I'm concerned. And I
definitely.
know a lot of people agree.
Definitely. First of all, I read an interview a while back with Geezer Butler, the bass player, and he was saying that, he was brought up as a Christian, and like you're kind of saying, the band early on, they were thought of as devil worshippers and stuff, and that's why if you look at a lot of those early photos, the guys decided, okay, we're going to wear these like black crosses in all the press photos and stuff. And Geezer says it was the band kind of playing with people, because I was brought up a Christian, and I tell people that, and then they were kind of wondering, well, is he a Christian, or are they Satan worshippers? What are they? And he kind of let people think whatever they wanted to think. So it's kind of interesting that the band would play with people like that, but it helped to kind of create that imagery about the band.
Well, Geezer said that they were rehearsing one day, and across the street at a movie theater there was the Boris Karloff movie Black Sabbath.
Yeah, that's how they came.
And Geezer said to the band, wouldn't it be kind of cool to play like some evil music and scare the shit out of everybody? Because nobody had done that before. The crosses that they used to wear were silver crosses, and they were actually made, I think, by Tony Iommi's father, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why they were made was because the band themselves were afraid of their own image. And that's why they wore silver crosses, and that's why they all wore it.
Wow.
Because originally, I think Geezer just wanted to write something kind of scary and whatever. But it took off. And see, the label, on their first album, how it was with a lot of artists back then, you would record an album, and then you wouldn't even see your album till the record company handed it back to you. So you really didn't have a ton of say in the artwork or the mix and mastering and all that process, because the label had all that power. So the label was the one that put that scary centerpiece in the original Black Sabbath album.
Wow. Yeah.
And so the label jumped on that Satan-worshipping evil image for Black Sabbath even more than the band did, and it kind of scared the band a little bit.
Wow.
But they went with it because it worked.
It worked, yeah.
And see, people forgot that ultimately it's show business.
Oh, yeah.
We're all in show business. So if you go to a scary movie, you go see Nightmare on Elm Street or something, and then 2 weeks later you're shopping in the grocery store and you run into Robert Englund, who played Freddy Krueger. You're not going to hold it against him because he played a character in a movie. But with music back then, they didn't look at it that way. If you were in a band and you were making music, all the press and society, a lot of those people took it as these guys really believe everything they're writing and singing about. It's real to them. But they had forgotten it's show business.
Yeah, yeah, and you made a good point too, in the fact that I agree with you. I dare say that Black Sabbath we can credit with really creating the metal sound, and I've heard other people say, well, before that you go back to Steppenwolf, but I agree with you, much more Sabbath, because I dare say we wouldn't even have metal music today if Tony Iommi had been in that accident when he was a young lad, in school, and had his tips of his fingers cut off. I mean, that's the whole reason he plays the way he does. And just think about that for a minute. If he did not have that accident, he might play very differently.
Right. I read his book twice. On the Speak of the Devil album. Now, I was kind of trying to build up to that.
Yeah.
Was when that album came out, I remember walking in a record store and seeing that album with Ozzy on the cover looking at me.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is so badass. It's like, I just had to have it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great metal live albums, but as far as I'm concerned,
that's it.
This one is my favorite, because if you listen to the Speak of the Devil album, the energy that you hear from the audience, all the funny shit that Ozzy says to the crowd, and the way he laughs, and I mean, just the whole vibe of it. Judas Priest Unleashed in the East is another great live album.
Oh, totally agree.
And I like Double Live Gonzo by Ted Nugent, and I like 101 Proof by Pantera, and Iron Maiden's got, everybody's got good live albums, but this album, there's so much behind the album. Like, first of all, the reason why it was created was Don Arden, who used to manage Black Sabbath, who was Sharon Osbourne's father. He told Ozzy, Black Sabbath is coming out with a live album with Dio singing it.
Yeah.
I want you to come out with a live album of all Black Sabbath stuff and you sing it. So Ozzy told the band, okay, we've got one more album that we have already committed that we have to finish, and Don wants us to do a live Black Sabbath album. He told the whole band that. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but Randy Rhoads was not a fan of Black Sabbath to begin with. He was never really into all that scary shit and all that.
Yeah.
But he joined Ozzy and everything went well. But he didn't even like, I read, there's two great books out there to read. Rudy Sarzo's Off the Rails of the Crazy Train.
Okay.
Read that a couple times. And then there's a author named Joel McIver, who also has a book about Ozzy and Randy. And Randy didn't even like, during their normal set when they were doing the Blizzard of Oz and the Diary of a Madman tour, they played a few Sabbath songs at the end. Randy didn't even like doing that. So when Ozzy told him he had to do a full album of it, Randy told Ozzy, I'll do the Black Sabbath album and I'll do one more original album with you, but then I'm leaving the band.
Yeah.
I want to go teach. I'm done with it. So, it's funny, Randy really didn't want to make that record.
Yeah.
And as fate would have it, he didn't end up making it.
Yeah.
However, Brad Gillis, who did make the album, recorded it playing on some of Randy's rig.
Wow.
And that's why, if you listen, I'm a huge, I know I'm just a vocalist, but I'm really into good lead guitar players and stuff that, and their tones and everything.
Yeah.
If you listen to the tone, the guitar tone on the Speak of the Devil album, it's probably the closest to the Randy Rhoads tone from the first two albums out of any guitar player that ever played with Ozzy.
And that would explain why. And let me tell you, Prophet, I learned a few other interesting things about what you're talking about. Now, the other reason that the record company wanted to release the, or I guess Ozzy wanted to release, agreed to it, was because prior to that, Black Sabbath's publishing deal had expired and they were getting ready to renew it. And so Ozzy, along with his manager and record company, thought, well, if we have Ozzy put this album out and it's all Black Sabbath tunes, then when we renew the publishing deal, Ozzy can, get a better deal, and he can get royalties for doing this album and all the writers that were involved. So that was a part of it too. And like you're saying, Randy was kind of against doing it. And I was also reading that initially it was not just Randy, but it was drummer Tommy Aldridge, and they kind of felt, okay, after two albums with Ozzy, they were kind of established artists, and they really and because they want publishing as well, they didn't think it benefited them to have an album all Black Sabbath tunes. Well, we didn't write any of these tunes. What do we want to do this for? And then
you still get a performance credit.
Yeah.
You still get paid for that, but you don't get the royalty.
But also I was reading that Rudy kind of agreed with Tommy and Randy, and initially all three of the guys told Sharon, and she was all right with it. But Ozzy got so pissed off that apparently he started taunting Randy, like when they do rehearsals and stuff, and he'd tell him, you know what, I've talked to Frank Zappa and Gary Moore, and both these guys said they would have no problem, taking your place in my band. And so there's a little bit of friction between Randy, I guess, and Ozzy, but not too many people know about this.
There was a lot, and Joel McIver in his book. Because see, if you read Off the Rails by Rudy Sarzo,
you have to read that. I've never read it, but
it's a fabulous book. But he is very careful about what he says.
Yeah.
Because he loves Sharon and Ozzy, and they gave him his first big break. Randy was the one who got him in the band. So he even if he knew some dirt on them, he wasn't going to let it out. But Joel McIver went in and interviewed everybody. And they said, and I believe he got this from Tommy Aldridge, if I'm not mistaken, 2 weeks before Randy died, they were in some restaurant or something, and he said Ozzy was drunk, and he walked right up to Randy and sucker punched him and hit him.
Oh, wow, interesting.
And Randy had just gone through having wisdom teeth taken out or something. He was still sick from that.
Wow.
But Ozzy was so pissed off that he said he was going to leave the band. And this is what's in the book, in Joel McIver's book, that Ozzy sucker punched Randy like 2 weeks before Randy died.
Wow,
I'm not judging anybody. Because number one, if you're Ozzy and Sharon, you put this band together, you invest a lot of time in all these people. You're trying to build an artist, as a single,
as a solo artist,
out of a very popular band. And so you got a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and finances wrapped up in this. And then a guy comes up to you and says, you know what, I've never been a fan of your band. I don't want to play that music, and I'll do it, but I'm going to leave, very soon after that.
Yeah.
So, and Ozzy, was a handful to deal with back then. If you read anybody who was around him, whether it was bands who were touring with him or the people working with him, he was pretty wasted all the time.
At that point, yeah. I mean,
and that's got to be hard. Think about, traveling the world with somebody who's wasted all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that can't be that much fun. I mean, after a while, you're like, fuck this.
I recently seen an interview with Dana Strum, the bass player from Slaughter, and he's a guy that
saw that.
He credits himself, with putting Randy and Jakey Lee in Ozzy's band, and he was talking about when, he first discovered Randy, and he took Randy down to audition. He was like, man, we could barely understand what Ozzy was saying. He was so drunk, he was slurring his words. The
only thing, though, that's weird for me is I don't think Rudy or Joel McIver mentioned that in their books.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well,
and what they say is Rudy was the one who I forget how they said it.
Recommended.
Randy got Rudy the job.
Oh, yeah.
But Rudy doesn't say anything about Dana Strum in his book that I remember. I read the book twice.
Interesting. Yeah. People have different stories, but
so here's the other part. The Live Evil album comes out, which is Black Sabbath with Dio, and we all know Dio's one of the greatest metal singers of all time, and probably for all time in the future too.
Oh yeah.
However, I love Dio's voice when he sings the songs he wrote.
Oh.
But when he was singing the Ozzy songs, I just don't care for it. And I love Dio's voice.
I hear what you're saying.
I don't care for it.
I got the reissue of Heaven and Hell, and there's like you get some bonus material with. There's like a live collection of tunes from that time, and some on the Ozzy stuff that he sings. It did not. You're correct. It did not sound like Dio. And Ronnie's a great voice, and I was reading something where Ronnie didn't like singing the Ozzy songs, not just because they were Ozzy songs, but because he thought, it didn't sound like him. It says, I couldn't even recognize my own. I couldn't even recognize my own voice, and that's what a lot of people don't realize is if you're talking about Black Sabbath or Ozzy solo stuff, a lot of the guys in Ozzy's band are true songwriters. I mean, of course, it's Ozzy's band, and he's going to get songwriting credit. But like Jakey Lee, Randy, I heard Ozzy talking about how Randy Rhoads was the first guy that really taught me how to write a true song. I didn't really know how to write a song, and Black Sabbath, Geezer wrote most of his stuff on those early Sabbath albums.
Geezer wrote all the lyrics.
Yeah, yeah.
In those, and I'll tell you something else. The Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman, Summer Bark at the Moon. All those lyrics were not written by Ozzy. They were written by Bob Daisley, the bass player.
Of course, yeah.
What Ozzy writes is the vocal melody line. So basically, Randy would come up with music. Bob Daisley would come up with the lyrics. They'd show it to Ozzy. He'd listen to it, and he'd figure out how to sing those lyrics to that melody line in the music.
Yeah, and that's
so, and that is a copyrightable thing. Like when you copyright a song, you copyright the lyrics, the musical melody, and the vocal melody. That's what you actually copyright at the in the old days they used to do it in Washington, but now you know
you can do it anywhere.
Bunch of different ways of doing it, but the Library of Congress. So he did, you know, he was a writer, but he didn't really write the lyrics.
That's what I mean.
And I look at a guy like Bob Daisley, I'm like, think about those first two albums, all those lyrics. That personified what a lot of people thought Ozzy Osbourne was, because those lyrics in those two albums are so brilliant.
And that's why do you think, like, even on No More Tears they bring Bob Daisley back, not just, you know, to play bass on the album, but you know, because he's a great writer. And it's funny that they had all these legal issues with him over years, you know, when he wrote all these great songs, and trying to deny him that, you know, but it is a music business. But you know, what did you think, you know, on those Ozzy albums a few years back when they reissued, like they bring in Robert Trujillo and Mike Ward, and we're going to re-record their, you know, those original guys' parts?
No, they actually did take the rhythm tracks out and put different, and I think it was Bosco is what I read.
Okay.
Who did the bass?
Okay.
And Mike Borden or somebody like
from
that.
From Faith No More,
I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it. And you know what? So many of the fans hated it. There was such a backlash.
Oh yeah, that they
pulled it off the market and they reissued the originals the way it should be.
Yeah.
You know, an album is a work of art. It's
true.
like a fucking Mona Lisa.
Yeah, yeah.
And those two albums are the fucking Mona Lisa 1 and 2. And you don't fuck with that, you know?
Yeah.
Now, I'm just a fan. I'm just one person.
No.
I'm just giving my personal opinion. But you don't fuck with that. And I was really disappointed in Sharon and Ozzy that they would even allow that to happen. And I understand.
Yeah.
You know, if you and I, if we get in a band together. And you write a song musically, and I say, okay, I tell you what, I'll give you $300 to sign that song over to me. And you go, okay, because you're broke, you need $300. Sure, I'll do it.
Okay.
And then I put out the album, and it makes, you know, it goes platinum. Later, you're going to want to sue, but you really,
you can't do it.
In a way, you shouldn't, because you made the agreement originally. And I think that's what happened probably with Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslick, is that they signed for a certain amount. And then later, the album sold way more. And of course, they wanted to come back and get a share of that.
I mean, I kind of have the same take as you on that, because, like you said, as a fan, I really believe they're messing with art, and especially when, I mean, just think of the backlash they would have received if they, okay, we're gonna take Randy off of this, but there was really no need to, you know. But even to take off the drum parts and the bass parts and re-record them with somebody else, it's like messing with, like you said, messing with fine art, if you will. And I'm glad
that's just petty. In my opinion, that was probably Sharon. Because that's petty as hell. And it's stupid as hell. You don't fuck with classic albums like that. You just don't. Now I get it if you remix and master it, or I understand people want to do
bringing in new people to do the parts. I mean, I don't totally agree with that.
What an insult, you know. And Bob Daisley, you take his bass parts out there, but he wrote all those lyrics, and how terrible and what a slap in the face to his abilities when he wrote lyrics and played bass on an album that went platinum, you know. And they called him back several times over the years on different albums.
That's the funny part.
He's that good.
And you're talking about album and music being a piece of art. Talking about a top interview here where you told me you remember walking in a record store when you could still do that back in the day. A lot of people listening to this, what's a record store? Used to be a place where you go buy music, folks. But
yeah, right.
but I mean, I remember like when I was growing up, walking in and seeing like Number of the Beast for the very first time, or Kiss Alive, opening that up, and it was an experience. And that's why, like, I hear what you're saying about this album, and but when you start talking about how great live album, I remember hearing about this album, but it kind of fell under the radar because it's been out of print for several years. I'm not sure why Ozzy wants to keep it out of print, but it makes it much more of a collector's thing. And then when you read about all that went into kind of getting it made, it makes for a very interesting story,
It brought him back from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was kicked out of Sabbath and he was killing himself in a motel room. Because he was so brokenhearted over losing. I mean, I get that. Because Black Sabbath was his baby just as much as it was Tony Iommi's.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because Ozzy was competing with Black Sabbath at the time. I mean, there was a thing, kind of a rivalry between them, and especially Dio and Ozzy, and Ozzy wanted to put this album, an all Black Sabbath live album, and we're going to compete with other Black Sabbath live album, and see which one sells better than the other. And it's interesting that the Live Evil, I mean, that had a lot to do with Ronnie finally leaving Sabbath, because I've heard him in interviews where he was talking about that he was told that Geezer and Tony would sneak in the middle of the night when him and Vinny weren't there. And,
I read that too.
And it's amazing that both these live albums have created such a controversy. It
kind of reminds me of the Megadeth album Countdown to Extinction. And the Metallica Black album, because they came out at the same time. And they were in a band together before, and they're similar in the sense that Countdown to Extinction is one of Megadeth's probably most commercial sounding albums, and as well as the Black Album for Metallica. And in the case of Black Sabbath and Ozzy, it was 2 live albums, but it was the same kind of feeling there, it's like, we're going to see who does better, and Dave Mustaine said that his album went like straight to number 2, and he was all excited, and what ended up being number 1 but the Black Album. And he's like, God dang it, I almost got there to number 1, and of course I got knocked out by Black Sabbath, but listen, music is, if you are a musician or artist, your art is extremely personal to most of us out there, We put our heart and soul in that stuff. And it lives on after we're dead and gone.
In fact, talking about the publishing and stuff, like I said, a lot of people, you look at the writing credits on those, early Black Sabbath albums, and a lot of times just say, to have all 4 guys' names on the song, but like you said, a lot of people may not even realize Geezer wrote all the lyrics. And I was reading, that's why he said, when Ronnie James Dio joined the band, he says, when you got a guy that writes like Ronnie, I thought, okay, I can kind of, I can just concentrate on playing bass now. I don't have to write all the lyrics. And he says, why would I compete with a guy like Ronnie, and that's why it's kind of interesting, like, you go back to Heaven Hell, 1980 when they released that, and a lot of people, at the time were like, who the hell are they going to get to replace Ozzy, and or what's going to happen to Ozzy now that he's not in Sabbath? So the bands are kind of, like you said, competing, and then they come out with this monster album with their new singer Ronnie James Dio, and it just takes.
And Don Arden was already hooked up with Dio somehow. At that time.
And it just takes you to another place. And I mean, anytime I listen to anything by Ronnie James Dio, I mean, he writes about demons and witches and wizards. Takes you to another world. But I believe I'm there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get it. No, he's one of my favorites too. I mean, he's one of a kind. Who else sounds like Dio?
Yeah, and it's kind of
people have tried,
And it's kind of interesting. So you have Black Sabbath and Ozzy in 1980. They both released these killer kind, I guess what you'd consider comeback albums. People didn't really know what they were going to do, and I really don't know which one I would say better. It's hard to say, but I think I lean a little more towards Heaven and Hell. I don't know, just maybe because Ronnie's no longer here, but I still say those first 2 Ozzy albums, kind of a pinnacle of his solo career. And interesting talking about the making of this. I think sometimes fate plays a cruel role here. I mean, the fact that Randy didn't want to play on this album and he ends up being killed in a plane crash,
Right.
that really has nothing to do with it. But I was reading at one point, like I said, he's threatening when Randy was still around and kind of letting it be known he didn't really want to make this album. He's saying,
Right.
Frank Zappa and Gary Moore, they said they'd be happy to. I mean, could you imagine Frank Zappa, of all people, in Ozzy's band? That would have been an interesting thing to
Right.
see, And
So then, but think about it. They get a guy like Brad Gillis,
Yeah.
who's Night Ranger.
a little more pop, yeah.
And from what I read, Ozzy treated him kind of like shit,
Yeah.
And he didn't really care about him. And I love what Brad Gillis did on that album. And there's also a DVD out there, Blu-ray, or I'm sure it's on YouTube,
Yeah.
because there was two Speak of the Devils in a sense. One of them was all Black Sabbath tunes. The other one was, of course, the music from Blizzard of Oz, and it was the tour Diary of a Madman. So Brad Gillis had to learn all that music. He not only had to learn the Black Sabbath stuff, he had to learn the Ozzy stuff that Randy wrote with him as well.
Oh yeah, and here's what I was reading.
And he did a phenomenal job. I mean, like I said, I love what he did. And one day Brad Gillis was on Facebook doing some kind of chat thing, and I just, said to him, "Hey man, I just want you to know that I love what you did on Speak of the Devil, and it's probably my favorite live album." And he actually messaged me back and said, "Thanks a lot, man. That means a lot." But I wish Ozzy and Brad would have made at least one album together, just to see what it would have sounded like.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious to know. I've never heard anybody really talk about this. If Brad Gillis initially had every intention of staying in Ozzy's band, did he always know he was going to go back to Night Ranger? Maybe he was away from.
Yeah, no, he did. He didn't. From what I read, he didn't want the job. He wanted to go back to Night Ranger because they were starting to happen.
Yeah, yeah,
and that was kind of his band,
baby.
His baby.
So you could see that. And I was reading, talking about him having to learn all these Sabbath tunes. I guess very much like Randy. I was reading Brad Gillis. He totally didn't know any of the Black Sabbath stuff, they had Rudy kind of teach him how to play the stuff, I guess, and he had to totally learn about it. But I don't think he was even aware of Black Sabbath, but he did not know any of the music at all.
He had to learn a shitload of material quickly.
Yeah, and see, at one point I was reading that Ozzy had. And obviously this is before Randy was killed, but when the three guys were kind of saying, we don't want to do this album, and they notified Sharon we're not going to do it. This is Tommy, Rudy, and Randy. At one point, Ozzy gets so frustrated that he fires all of these guys. And so again, it's kind of interesting that once Randy's tragically killed in the plane crash, Tommy and Rudy agree, okay, we'll do this so that this can happen. But even at that point, after the album is done, then Rudy then goes back to Quiet Riot too.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying it's not true, but I never read anywhere that Rudy and Tommy also didn't want to do it.
Well, you can later, where I got this, and I don't know if it's true, but I got that off. If you go to the type in Speak of the Devil Wikipedia, this is where I read that, and so
again, I would go back and read those books.
Okay, yeah.
Do you know where Tommy Aldridge came from?
Well, I know he came from a band. Biologically, I don't know where he was born, but
it's one of my favorite Southern
Black Oak, Arkansas.
Black Oak, correct.
Yeah.
And Black Oak, Arkansas, and I still love that band to this day. I still listen to Black Oak often, and a lot of people who hear this are going to be like, who's that? Probably, but they were what's called the first Southern rock band. When Lynyrd Skynyrd did their first world tour, they were opening for Black Oak, Arkansas.
Oh, wow.
And Tommy Aldridge was the drummer. And Black Oak, Arkansas toured with Black Sabbath, and that's where Ozzy first got a look at Tommy Aldridge, and he wanted him, once he was solo, he wanted him in the band right away.
Yeah.
But Tommy Aldridge had commitments, I guess, with Black Oak. So by the time the commitments were done, that's why Lee Kerslick ended up being in the band and making those two albums.
Oh, wow.
But after that, when Tommy got out of whatever he was doing, he joined Ozzy. So I find it hard to believe that Tommy would say I don't want to do the Black Sabbath album with you.
Okay, I'd have to look into it.
The fact that Black Oak, Arkansas toured with Black Sabbath, and that's when they first knew each other. Then he joined Ozzy's band.
Yeah.
And see, Rudy, I find it hard to believe that Rudy would say he didn't want to do it, because in his book he didn't say he didn't want to do it.
Interesting.
And he was so grateful to Sharon and Ozzy for, giving him the opportunity.
Well, like I said, interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because again, I got this off of Wikipedia, and sometimes that's, from what I hear, it's not always very accurate, but a lot of the stuff is. So I'm not sure, but I'd be interested to find out. But what it was saying is that supposedly, this was a story. It was on the Wikipedia, that Randy, Rudy, and Tommy were supposedly against doing the album because they felt supposedly, after doing 2 albums with Ozzy, that they'd established them as part of Ozzy's solo band. And of course,
that part's true. Yes,
yeah.
I say true. That part I did read about. That they did feel like they were established.
And according to this, also what I read, if it's true or not, I don't know, but that they didn't like the fact that it was going to have all Black Sabbath tunes, because then they wouldn't get any royalties. So that supposedly was the issue. I do not know, though. And if we can go down the track listing, another interesting thing about this is it's only like 6 tracks on there, but track listing was NIB, one of my all-time favorite tracks. Sweet Leaf, Never Say Die, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Iron Man, and Children of the Grave, and Paranoid is the kind of final track there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what have you read? Do you have any idea why they, it remains out of print to this day?
I have no idea about that.
Yeah.
Because in fact, I heard that from you, and Margie and I right away went online and tried to find an original version of it just to buy it. I have the version that was put out in the 90s, which was remastered.
Okay.
And it sounds killer, though. I mean, I used to have the original version years ago.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, the remaster version sounds even better.
Oh, of course.
They just had better technology, and they could bring the sounds out more.
You have to further research, but I think if you try to go on most sites, you're not. I don't think they include it on the official discography, and I don't know why you wouldn't, because it is an official release. But in any event, it's very hard to find. That's what I was told, and but I have to do some more research in that, and I'll update this when I post the interview. But
it's aside the fact that it's a live album, it's probably one of my favorite albums of any albums, in my life. Again, I was 20 years old when it came out. Now, this album, Speak of the Devil, came out in 82.
Yeah.
In 83, the US Festival happened, and I went to it, and we were down in the front. Not total front, but we were down in the front. We were close enough that I could take probably a tennis ball and hit somebody on stage if I wanted to, right?
Yeah.
So we were all in the crowd. Imagine this, there's 300,000 people at this thing. I'm 20, I'm getting ready to turn 21.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody in our area was talking like, okay, Motley Crue is done, Ozzy's coming up. Who's Ozzy going to have on guitar?
Yeah.
None of us knew.
Yeah.
And it ended up being Jakey Lee. And I got to tell you something. Jakey Lee put on a masterful show that day.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of the time just watching Ozzy's new guitar player because I was so blown away by the guy.
Yeah, Jake's an amazing guy. Jakey Lee, he's an amazing player. He remains under the radar, but and he was let go for similar reasons because he didn't want to renegotiate his contract or whatever.
He's so underrated that I hate it because Jakey Lee is fucking incredible, dude. You know, and what he did, him and Ozzy together, was just amazing. And think of this. Jakey Lee at one point played in Rat when they were still playing in the clubs.
Oh yeah, before even Warren DeMartini was in the band. He predates him.
Yeah. So he goes from playing in clubs. I think his first big gig with Ozzy was the US Festival. So he goes from being in front of a club audience to 300,000 people looking at him.
Yeah,
and he didn't flinch, dude. The guy was, and you could tell when he played the songs, he really did his best to give tribute to Randy the way Randy played. You know, he didn't do exactly, but he did. You could tell he got real close, and he did the very best he could.
And think of
one of the problems I have now, and I'm a Zakk Wylde fan.
Yeah.
And I love when Zakk Wylde plays the songs that he wrote with Ozzy, but I don't like it as much when Zakk Wylde is playing the Randy Rhoads songs, because he almost puts a little too much Zakk Wylde in that song. And I understand, you know, Randy died a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
But again, those albums are works of art. And I'm not saying, you know, you should be exactly like it, but, you know, give a hint. You know, I mean, give tribute to the man who wrote that stuff.
Yeah, and here's what I'll say about that. I mean, talking about Randy and his legacy for a minute. I mean, yeah, he's been dead a long time, but when you stop and think, okay, yeah, before Ozzy, he was in Quiet Riot and all that, but those Quiet Riot albums are only like really available in Japan.
Right.
And so, as far as most people around the world are concerned, Randy's legacy are those two Ozzy albums. You know what I'm saying? And so it's amazing that guy has the huge fan base that he does. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's amazing when you consider, like, you know, even Jimi Hendrix has more than 2 albums. You know what I mean? And he died tragically young.
Right.
And so that just speaks volumes of the guy he's playing. And talking about Jake and you know, Zakk for a minute. I mean, because all these guitar players that Ozzy's played with are super talented. Now Jake, very talented writer, very talented guitar player, but you know, after Ozzy, he formed this band Badlands with Ray Gillen, you know, a few years later, and then he kind of disappears for 20 years. We don't hear from him until he puts together this band Red Dragon Cartel. Totally different sounding than Ozzy or Badlands, which that's kind of what Jake wanted, I guess. And he's like, I've been away for 20 years. This is what I want to do now. I don't care if people like it. This is what I'm into. And he's one of those straight shooters, you know, as far as like, he doesn't care if he has a #1 album. He just is going to go in, and he's done 2 albums with Red Dragon Cartel, and he's kind of disappeared again. And I guess when he's ready to come out with a new album, he will. And Zakk, also super talented. I dare say, maybe a little more talented in the sense that not only is he a great guitar player, he can play the piano. He's a lead singer, and that's what I love about Black Label is. You know, even when like Zakk does an acoustic song, I mean, it's a heavy acoustic song, you know, and I just love what that guy does.
I do too.
Yeah.
But like I said, because I have so much love
for Randy.
Those first 2 records, and again, I'm not saying because guitar players are very different, you know, and it's all in the fingering and the execution. It's in the heart of the playing. I mean, so all you can do is try to come as close as you can. It's the same way with singers, you know. But I think Jakey Lee tried way harder to give tribute to Randy in those older songs, you know. And then there's a guy that people forget about, Joe Holmes, that was in Ozzy's band for about 5 years. And he actually co-wrote, I think, the song Junkie, but Ozzy never made an album with him. And Marge and I saw Joe Holmes play with Ozzy about 4 times. He did a very credible job. He just really had no personality on stage, and I think it hurt him.
He's really a forgotten guy. I mean, and he had some other little band that he did an album with, his own little project, and just got rave reviews, and everybody from Eddie Trunk to every rock critic was just saying what a great thing. But he remains under the radar for many of the reasons you state. I mean, he also, before he was ever in Ozzy, he played with David Lee Roth for a few years, and so the fact that he can play with, you know, such guys that are, you know, that legendary status, from David Lee Roth to Ozzy, I mean, he's got some talent. It's just, and I think
he was very, very credible guitar player.
And he could write too, like you said. But I think the fact that he never recorded with Ozzy, had he recorded even an album like Gus Steve
might
did,
have been really cool.
You know, so who knows what went on there? But I think too, when you talk about Jake,
look at it, okay?
Yeah.
Randy, besides being the amazing player he was, look at how he dressed and how he moved on stage. Look at his look as a performer. Then look at Jakey Lee.
Flashy, kind of a rock star. In fact,
and then look at Zakk Wylde.
Yeah. In fact,
and then look at Joe Holmes. And you can see the first 3 have their personalities are larger than life, just like they're playing.
Yeah.
And Joe Holmes was kind of low key on stage.
Yeah,
his playing was amazing, but his look, his performance, and so forth was, I think, and this again, all this crap I'm saying is just my opinion, but it was kind of low key. You know, it didn't grab the audience like when Zach's up there. I mean, the guy is a presence. You know.
Oh yeah. I mean, just to kind of take that home, what you're saying is, I recently read an interview that George Lynch gave where he was talking about, you know, he was briefly in Ozzy's band. He never played a live gig or anything, but he had the gig for a day or two, and then Sharon fired him and ended up giving the gig to Jake E. Lee because she didn't think George looked like a rock star, but she thought Jake looked like more like a rocker. You know,
Jake E. Lee said when he did that audition, he said he totally flubbed it, and he thought, there's no fucking way I'm getting this gig. And then Ozzy walked up to him and said, you want the gig?
Yeah.
So it's like, see, Joe Holmes for Ozzy is kind of the Tony Martin of Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Tony Martin did 4 albums. He's an amazing singer, right?
Yeah.
And he's the closest thing to Dio probably that they got to. You know, amazing singer, very talented, but kind of boring on stage. No real presence. And same thing that I say about Joe Holmes. Amazing player. Yeah. He's got all the talent in the world.
No pizzazz.
The presence wasn't there for me as a fan. Same thing with Tony Martin.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And you know, you keep saying this is your opinion, but that's why we're doing this, Prophet, because, you know, for 2 reasons, as I brought up at the top of the interview. Number one, this you chose to talk about Speak the Devil because this album meant so much to you. And when you're talking about it in our This Is Metal Facebook page, I thought, boy, you know, this is a great album, and I kind of had forgotten about it. You kind of reminded me of it. I went online on YouTube, because you can check it out there. They do have the full album and all the tracks on there if you want to check it out. And I thought, you know, this is how can people forget about such, you know, great music? This is a great album, and I forgot about it, and so I want to thank you.
It was a better live Black Sabbath album than the Black Sabbath album.
So true. In fact, you know, I don't know that Black Sabbath to this day has really put out the ultimate, if you will, live album. I mean, going back to 1980, they had, I forget what it was called.
The Last Supper.
The last.
Put out with Ozzy later.
No, it was going back to.
But it didn't have the energy that Speak of the Devil has.
Yeah, but they had one in 1980. I forget what it's called now. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it was
Live at Last.
Live at Last, and it was kind of something.
Live at Last was with Ozzy before they kicked him out. That was actually the first live album. Look that one up. It's called Black Sabbath Live at Last.
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah, and then they re-released that a few years back in a new package. They changed the title to Past Lives, and besides the artwork, what you're else getting is it's a 2 CD set, and they released like the whole set or whatever. So that's kind of an interesting way of doing it. But
that was back when Ozzy was still with Sabbath before they ever kicked him out, though.
Yeah.
That's a really old album.
Yeah, and then probably the best.
And none of the guys in the band liked it, from what I read.
Yeah.
And that's why they didn't really push that album. But you know.
Yeah.
Okay, the same thing with the tribute album. They recorded it while they were on tour, and I think they recorded 2 different concerts.
Yeah.
And from what I read, when Ozzy listened to it, he thought it was a piece of crap.
Yeah.
And and again, you know, that's subject to probably how he felt that day. If he was having a bad day or whatever and listens to it, he might not give it a chance. If he was having a good day and listened to it, he might go, hey, that's not that bad. But that day he said it's crap. They shelved it. But of course, after Randy died, they pulled it back down, had another listen, and that's what the tribute album is, which is a great record.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason they put that out back in '87 was that, you know, Randy had been dead for a few years, and Jake E. Lee had just been let go from a band, and you know, Ozzy was not going to maybe
perfect timing to keep his name out there.
Yeah, and I think it served its purpose. And then, you know, talking about Zach, you know, it's kind of funny if you look at what the guy looks like now to when he was first joined Ozzy's band. I mean, this young New Jersey, guy. He was skinny, and he was a pretty boy, if you know what I mean. He's even joked about clean shaven. Looks nothing like he does now. And it's just amazing to see what he is kind of morphed into.
He evolved delved into.
Yeah, but
and did you ever get his Pride and Glory music?
oh yeah, I love that. I love that album.
I have a 2 CD
Oh really?
Package of all the Pride and Glory stuff, and I love it.
Oh, I'd have to get that. I mean, I just have the original release, but 1 CD. But I mean, there's a song on there called like "I Hate Your Guts," and there's one called "Cry Me a River." I mean, they really sound more like Leonard Skinner-ish. And then
yeah, and that's what he was going for. He was going for that southern metal, southern rock.
Yeah, and he's got Brian Tichy on the drums. He's a guy that he played for the Dead Daisies a few years ago, the drummer. He's been in Whitesnake and Billy Idol. I think he briefly was in Ozzy's band too. And then you had James Lomenzo, who's played with White Lion and Megadeth. But yeah, that was a great band. Only one album. But I tell you, all these years later, that album it holds a special place in my heart. And the other one I haven't heard yet that I really want to get is he's got this band called Zach Sabbath, and they put out an album earlier this year of Zach doing his stuff, his version of Sabbath's song. So
yeah,
what I've heard, it sounds pretty unique and pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, I'm a Zach Wild fan.
All the way.
I got to meet him when they came on tour here to support the Mafia album, and my son and I not only got backstage, but we got to stand on the side of the stage.
Yeah.
The whole show, why Black Label was playing, and later Zach hugged me, and then he hugged my son twice.
Oh wow!
And when he was on stage, he'd be like doing a solo, and he'd look at my son, who was a teenager at the time.
Yeah.
This was back in 2005, and he'd point at him, And he was just a really cool guy. And right before they started their set, he walked in the venue backstage, and before he went on stage, he hugged each one of his crew members. And then they went on stage, and I thought, what a cool fucking way to do things. It's like a family, and I've been in heavy metal myself since 1982, and we value our crew. I mean, our crew is our family. Those guys set up the stage, they put the banners up, everything. They tear it all down after we're done, and here we get to go hang out with fans or sign autographs or whatever, and these guys work their butt off because they love the band.
Yeah.
And I love seeing a big star like Zach Wild, show that kind of love to his crew before he played.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. I mean, I hear what you're saying, because I love to see guys like that have that kind of gratitude and appreciation towards their fans. I mean, funny stories. I'll tell you about the guy that, this sounds funny to say this, but the guy I probably have the most hate and disrespect for, but I've never even met, and it would be the drummer from Rat, Bobby Blotzer. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but initially my issue with this guy was he would not only badmouth his bandmates, but he'd get online and he'd badmouth his fans. And yeah, I'll be honest, I was one of the fans that he badmouthed one day, but he made such a point of like singling me out, and I don't really care that he singled me out, because this little episode ended up on like Metal Sludge, and I thought, okay, that's kind of cool, but what it is, I made some statement to the effect that, that was when he was trying to go out and calling another band Rat. He had a fake rat, and I said something to the effect, how can this guy, a lot of people had the same opinion, how can this guy go out and call his band Rat when he's not even an original member? He wants to play the songs at all. He didn't even really play a role in writing. All these other guys wrote the hits, and he's the drummer on them, but he wants to go out and call his band Rat and play these songs that other guys wrote. And then if a fan doesn't like it or something, has something not positive to say, he would say something nasty to all these fans and attack them. And I just, and then like you tell people, okay, you're not my friend anymore. And he wouldn't do interviews unless he was going to get unless they're going to pat him on the back and tell him how great he was. And just when you see stuff like that, it really, it makes you not appreciate.
LA Guns were doing that. They had 2 LA Guns.
Yeah.
They had 2 Great Whites. 2 Queensryches, basically. Now you call it Jeff Tate's Queensryche or whatever. But how you avoid that, we learned a hard lesson. As you know, when our band started out, we were called Crown of Thorns from 1993 to 1997. We already had 2 records out. We had all kinds of T-shirts and posters and everything that said Crown of Thorns. And one day, Marge found a band in New Jersey who had actually trademarked the name Crown of Thorns 2 years before we started using it.
Oh, wow.
So we knew there was no way we could fight for the name.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we had to find a new name. The album we had out at the time was called The Spiritual Visions of Saint Madness. So it was Crown of Thorns, The Spiritual Visions of Saint Madness. So Margie and I got with an entertainment attorney and we did a worldwide search to see if anybody owned the name Saint Madness, and nobody did. So right on the spot, we trademarked it. And I'll be honest, a lot of bands don't bother to trademark their name, number one, because it costs thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
However, once you trademark your name, it makes it very hard for anybody else. Like, there are no former members of Saint Madness that suddenly could now go, oh, this is Joe Blow's Saint Madness.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we actually own the trademark on the name.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. The LA Guns thing you bring up, that's probably the longest standing band that's had that type of a situation, going over 20 years. And where you had Tracy Guns and Steve Riley, who's not even really an original member, but supposedly him and Tracy had some verbal agreement that, okay, since you've done so much for the band, I'm going to give you 50% of the band. And they've kind of been able to go this far, but then they ended up recently having a settlement out of court where the judge is looking at, like, okay, did you and Tracy ever file any taxes together as under the same company name? And they couldn't prove any of this, and so Steve Riley was kind of had to agree that, okay, he can call his band Riley's LA Guns or something, and Tracy's,
which makes it more of a tribute.
Yeah.
And maybe that's how Jeff Tate,
well, Jeff Tate, what they came to an agreement too, and it's kind of interesting because very much like you see a lot of these tribute bands do. The band agreed, okay, Jeff Tate can't call his band Queensryche, but he can call it Operation Mindcrime. Interesting enough, Operation Mindcrime is their most successful album, so he can kind of perform any Queensryche songs he wants, and he can highlight those Operation Mindcrime albums. So he's like, yeah, why not? And it seems to work.
No, of course he can.
Yeah.
And in my band, if a former member
even tried that,
puts out an album, all they have to do is give us royalties. But you cannot, an artist cannot say to somebody, you cannot copy my song, you cannot cover my song.
Yeah.
Because all that artist has to do is pay the royalties.
Sure.
And that's it. Nobody can tell them that they can't do it.
Yeah. Well, let's see. It sounds like you've done.
You can say, please don't record. Someone tried that with Weird Al Yankovic. It was what's his name?
I don't know, but
I can't remember his name. But he had asked Weird Al, please don't do a parody of one of my songs, but he did it anyway because you can't stop that. As long as they pay the royalties, you can't stop it.
Yeah, let me ask you now. We've been talking all about your favorite Ozzy live album, Speak of the Devil, but let's get into what you're doing with your band now, Saint Madness. And I know you have another band that recently released an album. Is that correct? Are you getting ready to release it? The one with the...
No, it's out there. Okay. And it's actually the second CD. We put out a first CD by Prophet and the Cowboys of Apocalypse
that's it,
in 2010.
Yeah.
And that song's called The Edge.
Oh, okay.
And we got the Phoenix Music Award for Record of the Year that year back in 2010. And the music's 90% acoustic.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And it has a southwestern flavor and a little bit of southern, a little bit of blues, a little
bit
of rock.
You sent me the first album that you guys had done when we did the last interview, and I really dug it. It was kind of different, and but when you go outside your regular band, that's what you want to do. You don't want to do kind of a carbon copy, otherwise,
Yeah. So the new record's called Last Days in Paradise, and it's been 11 years to put out a follow-up. However, the new record is very strongly connected to the first one because I started writing most of the lyrics for the new album back in 2008 after my mother died.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know what to do with all my emotions, and so I just started writing songs like a crazy person. But I knew that by the way the lyrics were, that they weren't really Saint Madness songs.
Yeah.
So I just shelved them. I put them in a book and put them away. And back in 2018, Sid and I were talking, and we're like, hey, I said, Sid, do you ever want to break out your acoustic guitar and maybe write some songs and maybe even put out a second Prophet and the Cowboys album? And he said, yeah, that'd be cool.
Wow.
So we started writing songs, and I dug those lyrics out that I had written back then. And we made the new album, which is over an hour long. The first one was 39 minutes. This one's over an hour.
Oh, cool.
And we do 2 covers on this one. We do the old song from the 60s, Little Red Riding Hood. And we also do a cover of White Wedding by Billy Idol.
Oh, I bet that's cool.
Kind of like a southern rock kind of flavor.
I dig that, when bands cover other bands and they, like you said, kind of put your own spin on it. That's pretty cool.
But we also always try to give tribute to the original version.
Yeah.
So we don't try to stray so far that when you listen to it, you're like, I can't even recognize.
Oh, no. But just like when you talk about...
We try to give tribute. And whenever we do a cover on an album, we do it in tribute to the artist, because we try to find artists that have influenced us when we were growing up or whatever, and that's why we do covers that some are metal, some aren't. In St. Madness, like we do Johnny Cash, we do Elvis, we also do Judas Priest or Ozzy or Black Sabbath or Metallica.
Oh, that's cool.
We've done covers by all those on albums.
Yeah, so what's going on with St. Madness now?
We've got 2 brand new songs that we're writing now.
Oh, cool.
So we're just going to keep writing and go in and start recording. We've already got 11 records out, and we've done this all on our own label. I mean, out of our own pockets. There's been no big record company come in and do all this. Everything that we've done on our own. And that's why the label name Nasty Prick Records. When we were called Crown of Thorns, I created the label and the label name, and I wanted it to somehow go with Crown of Thorns. So Nasty Prick Records means a thorn will give you a nasty prick.
Oh, wow.
And I knew right away everybody would take it the opposite way, and that's why I like it so much.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's interesting because our mutual friend Dan Montgomery, he had me call into his show a few weeks ago, and I was talking about your band and saying, you guys are, I think, Arizona's best kept secret, because you're a band that when people hear of an album or hear any of your music, people just love it. I know I did. And I thought I remember when you contacted me the last time about doing an interview with me, and you sent me your album, and I thought, wow, I just love this album from top to bottom. I mean, it's like albums that you'd get, when I was growing up, and where it didn't just have one hit song. You could listen to the entire album. It was a nice package, and then so I thought, man, more people need to get turned on to this band. So I really appreciate you doing the interview today. It was great talking to you again.
Yeah, and you can go to Bandcamp. All you type in is Bandcamp it's like Bandcamp./St. Madness.
Okay.
And you'll get our page, and you can listen to every one of our albums on there. By the way, if you scroll to the bottom of the page, there's a link to Prophet and the Cowboys of Apocalypse, and both of our albums are on there. And I've set it up so that you can stream any of our albums that you want for free. Oh,
that's totally cool. Because you gotta kind of have that feeling anyways, like a lot of us, that a lot of people aren't going to buy albums just because they're kind of lazy that way. So that's cool that you do that for the fans.
I just want them to enjoy the music, man. That's really what it's about. It's not about money, and it's not about any. I love being an entertainer. I consider it an honor, and I love making people happy, man. And the people that like St. Madness music or Prophet and the Cowboys, I want them. If they can't afford to buy the record, I want them to be able to listen to it for free anyway. Yeah, and so I guess that's the best place to wrap this up. Is how's COVID affected you guys in Arizona? Has it been like here in California, where everything's been locked down for the last year? You haven't been able to get out and do anything? Oh, we're all open now. In 2020, though, we were locked down, and we played 3 shows that whole year. But again, keep in mind that while we were locked down, it gave us the ability to finish writing and recording the Prophet and the Cowboys record. So we stayed busy the entire time, and we rehearse 3 nights a week like religion. We've done that for 28 years. Wow. And so once they said, you know, small groups were allowed to get together, we went right back to rehearsing and writing. So we personally stayed busy pretty much the whole time. But Arizona's open now, and, cool. And we've got 4 shows booked right now. The next one's going to be on June 25th at a place called The Blues in North Phoenix. Well, but we've got 4 shows booked so far.
Will that be your first show since 2020?
No, we've already played 2 shows.
Oh, and how did that go over? That had to be like a great feeling.
They went over great because people were sick of being locked in their houses. So, you know, the people are coming out to the shows. And maybe in that sense, you know, in a backhanded way, maybe COVID helped because it shut everything down to the point where people now are so glad to get back out and be able to go to shows or movies or whatever and have fun that they're excited again.
I mean, speaking for myself, it made me realize we take a lot of stuff for granted in life. I mean, I never would have thought we'd live in a world where, you know, you wouldn't be able to go to a movie theater for a whole solid year, you know, and when I finally got to go.
People couldn't even go to church.
Yeah, I mean, that's how ridiculous it got.
That never happened here in America.
And you know, you're kind of lucky in Arizona there because, I mean, here in California where I am, in beautiful sunny Los Angeles, I mean, the governor's decided here, but it's hopefully going to be recalled. Oh, well, okay, we're going to finally open the state up on, you know, this coming Tuesday, the 15th of June, and we're going to decide. We're going to wait till then. We'll let you know if you still have to wear a mask or not, but we want to do it the right way. I know you're doing it the wrong way, I think, but whatever.
You know, brother, I was born in California, and I always loved California, but I'm so glad I don't live there now.
Yeah, you should see what it is. Yeah.
I don't want to go through all that, but I was born in Glendale, you know, and I got to tell you, all through the 80s, man, I was in metal bands, and I had the best time of my life, you know, in California back then.
Yeah, even Hollywood, you go down to the strip, and that is not what it once was in the 80s. I mean, it's very...
Not even close.
Yeah.
We played the Whiskey in 2010, which was a great show. We played with Neil Turbin, the first singer of Anthrax on the Fistful of Metal album, and he had a band called Death Riders.
Yeah, I remember,
And we were on that show, and Metal Sanaz came out, and she hosted the show, and it was a great show. We had a great time. But it just didn't have the same feel that it used to have back in the day.
Oh, no, that's still missing. But so I guess the final question for you today, in regards to St. Manus, you said that you've got 2 new songs. You're working on that. Are you working towards a full album?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And you expect to have that out maybe next year?
No, it won't be a year. We take like 3 years to make an album.
Okay, well, hey, we got a new one from other bands, so that'll give...
and that's a good reason for putting out that other one.
Yeah.
But we did put out Bloodlust-Capades in 2018, so it's already been 3 right now. But we're actively writing songs. I for one, it's a financial thing because we pay for it ourselves.
Yeah,
but the other thing is, it's nice to leave an album out there 2-3 years
to live with it
or so, and let people digest that are fans of your band. Let them digest that album instead of back in the day, you know, in the 70s and 80s. There were some bands like Ted Nugent. The guy was coming out with a new album every year.
Oh yeah, they don't do like that.
And maybe back then it was good to do that, but now I don't think it's so good because you just put out so much material out there after a while. I don't know that any of it really catches, you know, the people like it would if they can live with the album for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like where Kiss is in their career. I mean, I'm a diehard Kiss fan, and I love the new Kiss album as much as anybody, but I'm all right with them saying, okay, we're going to retire, and we don't think we're ever going to release it. Okay, I dig what's out there, you know, so I think...
Yeah, and they got 40 albums.
Yeah, what else do you want?
So
what else do you
I love Kiss, too. I've loved them since, gosh, I was probably in 5th grade, you know. First Kiss album I ever got was Kiss Alive.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with the band at that point, and that was in 75.
Yeah, and you know, to wrap us up, too, we were talking about how this all got started, about doing this interview on Speak of the Devil, is, like I said, I was talking about some of my favorite live albums on my This Is Metal page, and you know, you kind of chimed in, and I thought, yeah, that's really great live album. You know, another one that was on my list was Cheap Trick Live at Budokan, for the simple fact that they're a great live band. But I'll tell you, I don't know if you've ever heard Prophet, the original version of that song, I Want You to Want Me. It sounds nothing
yeah.
like the Budokan version. It sounds like a swampy country song. And man,
Yeah.
they, on that version, on the live album, they brought that song to life. They gave it new life. And
yeah, I love the Cheap Trick at Budokan album.
Yeah.
And I saw Cheap Trick at the LA Coliseum in 1979. There was something called the LA World Hunger Televent.
Oh, wow.
And I went to that. And the four headliners were Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, and Van Halen when Van Halen was quite young.
Oh, wow.
And it was a 2-day event. And Cheech and Chong performed both days.
Amazing,
and
wow.
So I got to see Cheap Trick perform basically the Budokan album in 1979, right after the album came out.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, Prophet, my friend, it was great talking to you about this. I love talking about Speak of the Devil. That's thanks to you. I kind of remembered it now because that's like many people, I forgot about what a great album that was. And so thanks for reminding us of that. And, maybe when I get a chance to, get the album or go online, like you said, and check out your new album, we can do an interview, talk about the songs and the album, because I'd like to help promote that as well. So this interview...
Just send me your address again in the text.
Okay, sure.
And I'll send you a copy of the disc so that you have that too.
I appreciate that so much, and yeah, we'll promote that, because I'd like to really further promote that and help spread the word about anything that you got going on, because I really dig all your music, and I'd love for people to hear about it.
Cool, man. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on.
Okay, like I said, the interview we just did is going to go up in early July, so I'll let you know once it gets posted, okay? So take care, my friend.
And long live the fans of metal music.
That's right. You take care, Prophet. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.